Hey guys, and welcome back to the series where I react to, review, fix your setups. I popped up a post on Instagram as usual looking for new setups for 2020 and you guys did not disappoint. I've got a lot to go through. I'm going to fit as many as I can in this video. I will say though, I have had the flu. It's still lingering. My throat is still a mess, so if I sound extra breathy and gross, that is why. Anyway, before we get into the setups, I would like to thank furbabyprints.com for sponsoring today's video. You may remember a little while ago they made me this amazing fleece with Lyra on it. Well, this time round I had a phone case made. Basically, Furbaby Prints takes your photo, turns it into an illustration, which can then be added to a range of products with a variety of backgrounds, and you can even add your pet's name onto the design. I will say this phone case fits on really nicely. It has those rubber edges, which are great if you're clumsy like me and you drop your phone, but also I absolutely love this illustration of Lyra. Now you can actually use my discount code Gecko-15 to get 15% off of your order. I will leave links below and would love to see what you get made, so feel free to tweet me or tag me in a photo on Instagram of your creation. But once again, thank you so much to furbabyprints.com for sponsoring this video. But now onto the setup. So the first one comes from, I believe you pronounce it Joel? I may have got that wrong. I'm so sorry if I have. He is from Brazil. He just wants to know how he can improve on his Leopard Gecko tank, which is 60 by 30 by 30 centimeters. Firstly, let's look at this little gecko's face. How cute is that? But yeah, this tank, I would say it may need a bit more room. Ideally, you do want 2 to 3 decent size hides. I think the one the gecko's in this picture is really nice and big. The little house one, I'm not really sure how big that is. I'm sure it can curl up in it, but if you can get 2 to 3 nicely sized hides and a bit more room outside of that to move around, that's ideal. I did work out that this is actually over 14 US gallons, which of course is better than a 10 gal tank, but it does feel quite narrow to me. So I think you're on the right track. You know, you've got your water dish, your calcium, your food dish, 2 hides, a heat mat. It could be a lot worse. I think all you really need to do is get a bit more room. So if you're able to upgrade that tank to a 20 gallon or a little bit bigger, that would be best. This next setup is for a leopard gecko called Calcifier. That's a proud sploot right there, look at that. Basically, he has a deep heat projector, a shade dweller UV lamp, biodude substrate, slate, the whole shebang. But his owner is struggling to keep the tank at an ideal temperature as it's very cold at the moment where they are. Now they say the deep heat projector is set up in one corner, so I don't know if it's over one of these hides. If so, I would actually recommend moving that slate hide underneath the heater and also using a thicker piece of slate. That usually works out a bit better. Overall, I think the tank looks really cool, plenty of room to explore, different textures, but I think if that is a problem, if the deep heat projector is just in that one corner, move the slate over to that corner. The next setup is a Crested Gecko one and it comes from Betsy. She's having trouble keeping her temperature and humidity consistent. She feels her gecko is a little underweight and also wants to know if a snake plant is a good option for her tank. So first things first, snake plants, they're great, they're sturdy, they don't spread out too much and I would definitely recommend them. As for temperature and humidity, you did mention that you're using a heat mat but would like a deep heat projector in the future. Whatever you are using, just make sure you are using a thermostat with it. That will help with keeping the temperature consistent. Also make sure the tank isn't placed near any windows where the sun might come in and overheat it. With the humidity, if you've seen my previous video about what I use with my Crested Gecko, I talk about a technique with putting tinfoil and bubble wrap over part of the mesh lid, and that can really help keep that humidity in. And if you don't think your spray bottle is really doing the trick, switch to a pressure sprayer. I used to have a little handheld sprayer and honestly the difference is unreal. So pressure sprayers where we get a little hand sprayer or one you pump up, you know, the big one that I use, that can make a massive difference. Now I know you're also all concerned that your gecko was underweight. You mentioned in the email your gecko is a baby. To me, it's hard to say from one photo, but it doesn't look sickly underweight. I've definitely seen smaller, skinnier geckos. I think once you get the humidity and temperature consistent and correct, your gecko's appetite should be a lot better. Now we're going to take a little break from the main big setups. We will return to them in a moment, but we're going to look at the quick questions, the quick fixes. So sometimes in emails, people just have one little question that I think will actually help a lot more people, and so I'll feature them here. So the first one comes from Cade, the Crested Gecko. The owner just wants to know how to keep the eco-earth damp as it dries out, even though he sprays the tank morning and evening. Now I would recommend mixing in some moss, and I see you've got some in there already, but it does look quite dry, so either really water that or get some new ones. I actually use Pro Rep Live Moss, and I have to say that is really good. That even stays wet and damp. I've had a bag of that for way over a year and it's still wet in the bag, and I've never added water to it. So that's a really good one you can try. Also, don't be afraid to just sort of water the eco-earth a little bit like you would a plant pot. Sometimes just misting with your sprayer is just going to do the top level of eco-earth, so deep down it isn't getting very wet. So, tip a bit of water in there, mix it around a bit with that moss, and you should see better results. Next, Josie asks how she can make her Leopard Gecko tank less boring and that she is actually upgrading to a bigger tank soon. This question gets asked quite a lot because sometimes you get your hides in there, your water bowl, and you're like, okay, I've got everything I need, but why is this not very interesting? And I honestly think sometimes all you need is to add a few little fake plants here and there, and that can really add some colour to the tank. You can also add different textures like a bit of cork or something. It just adds a bit of variation. And of course, a background can really transform a tank. Next, we have another Crested Gecko tank, and basically they want to know how to help the plants thrive, as since taking this photo, the golden pothos has actually died. Now in their description they do say they're using UVB for the plants, and that may actually be the root of the problem. Now in my misconceptions about bioactive tanks video, which I'll link here and below, I go into more detail as to why UVB will not make your plants thrive and that an LED growth light will work a lot better. There are lots of different ones out there, but personally I use the Jungle Dawn. Then we had two questions from Ruby. So she wanted her tank to be more naturalistic and she wanted to add things in for a gecko to climb. For this I would recommend something like a big thick cork branch. They're sturdy and thick enough for your gecko to actually climb on, and obviously that brings in that more naturalistic element. And also Ruby asked what she can offer her gecko, as he doesn't like crickets or mealworms. So you can also try dubia roaches, locusts, calci worms, hornworms if they're legal where you are. Unfortunately they aren't over here, but there are actually quite a few different things to offer other than just crickets and mealworms. Now back to the main setup questions. So the next one comes from Cecilia. She has basically divided this tank so she has a 3-year-old female on one side and a 5-month-old male on the other side, and she's using a deep heat projector with a dimming connection. Now one thing I noticed is I couldn't actually see a thermostat or thermometer probe on the area where the heater is projecting on. So I'm not 100% sure what's actually measuring and controlling the temperature. Maybe I just can't see that in the photo. But just make sure you aren't solely relying on this analog thermometer in the background. Also, I will say that when the male matures, you may want to use something like opaque to divide them. If he can see or smell that female, he's going to be doing a mating display. He's going to get very frustrated. So in the long term, I don't know how well this current setup will work. The next tank is from Liv. It's a 3 foot by 1.5 by 1.5 foot. She uses a deep heat projector, an 8-watt UVB mini kit, earth mix arid. She's getting a background soon. She's got it all going on, but she doesn't know if the tank is too big and that her gecko doesn't really use a lot of it. So first things first, though it already looks it, just make sure the distance between the heater and the basking area and the UV basking area is correct. Make sure they aren't too far away because sometimes they don't always work so well. You said that you're using a mini kit, which is actually the 2.4% UVB, but I think due to the height of this tank, you'll probably need a 7% UVB shade dweller with this tank. I'd also try using a thicker bit of slate underneath your deep heat projector, maybe even make a hide out of that. That can work really well. Also, I did notice that the thermostat probe is directly underneath the deep heat projector. So what I would suggest is, once you've built this slate hide, put that probe about an inch or two outside the diameter of the deep heat projector. There's actually a whole chapter in the Arcadia book, the Elements series, part 1, Fire. It's a really good book, but it will explain why you need to do this. Size-wise though, I think this tank is great. Obviously, this is something I'm going to have to observe with Diego. I'm going to have to figure out if he's actually going to use all this space and see how that goes. But I think once they're properly energized, they should move around a lot more. And the last setup we'll look at today, and don't worry, I still have many more to go through, so there will be future videos, but the final setup is from Jan from Austria. So he has this 46-gallon tank. He's using a heat mat and has a 2.4% UVB kit, and is thinking of going bioactive in the future, but wants my opinion on this. I think this definitely has a lot of potential if you decide to go bioactive. The tank is so nice and big that there's a lot that can be done in here that'd be really cool. But like Liv, I would probably recommend upgrading the UVB to 7%, as the tank is quite high. But yeah, I think this has lots of potential. I know in your email you said you thought your 7-month-old Gecko looks a bit overweight, but actually to me she looks perfectly fine. So keep feeding her normally, she looks good to me. So yeah, those are the setups. I tried to fit in as many as possible. I will put even more in future videos, but at the moment I'm really struggling to record. My throat is on fire, but I hope you've enjoyed this video. Once again, thank you to furbabyprints.com for sponsoring this video. If you haven't subscribed already, please do. But thank you for watching, guys, and goodbye.